campaign. Item number 5 is authorizing an MOU with Wiley Weaver Law to utilize the space at the Lake Street Safety Center. Item number 6 is accepting an Edward Byron Memorial Justice Assistant Grant to support the police and attorney office initiatives. Item number 7 is authorizing an MOU with Corner House. Item number 8 is authorizing revenue contract with SMG for law enforcement services at the U.S. Bank Stadium. And item number 9 is authorizing a contract amendment with Fairview Health Services for continued implementation of a nutrition-focused chronic disease project. Item number 10 is referring to staff the subject matter of an ordinance related to fees for use for city-owned resources. And I'll see if my colleagues have any questions. I'll first call on President Payne.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. This is a question for the city attorney. I'm wondering if you know if this FDA grant went through our new approval process through the attorney's office.
Mr. Chair, Council President Payne, I am assuming that it did, but I don't know that for a fact. I can follow up on that for you if you would like me to.
I think that'd be good probably for the rest of the body to know as we go into the council meeting next week.
Will do.
Yep, thank you.
And I can give a quick update on that, President Payne, because I did reach out to staff about my concerns about this, given the federal administration. And the city attorney reviewed the grant award and determined that the conditions were written in 2024 and in the manner that the city accepted this previously. So there was a review done. There should be no concerns. I brought it up in agenda setting in case that I had some concerns. So.
Great, thank you.
But it would, for administrative follow-up, it would still be great to follow up on the question that President Payne asked.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, so if there are no further questions, I'll move approval of items 2 through 10. I'll move aside item 1 for the discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? That carries and the consent agenda is approved. Next, we have the public hearing item. This item is the passage of an ordinance relating to civil rights, adding new protected classes, bolstering enforcement of crime protections, and amending procedures for efficiency and ease of use. Here to kick off the public hearing is Director Kayla Diarra. Welcome up.
Hi, thank you. Chair Chavez, council members, good afternoon. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Kayla Diarra, and I am the Deputy Director of our Civil Rights Department here at the city. I'm really happy to be here to talk about proposed amendments to our Civil Rights Ordinance. So just a brief overview of the things I plan to cover in this initial presentation. First, I want to provide some information on how we process discrimination complaints generally and how we enforce our current civil rights ordinance within our Civil Rights Department. I'll then move to an overview of the amendments that are being proposed, including the 3 new protected classes that are being proposed, bolstered current protections, and then procedural changes to our case processing via these amendments. Then I'll address the racial equity impact of these amendments, as well as detail how we would plan to measure the impact of these amendments if they were to pass. And then I will end with a thank you to our partners who have been such a valuable part of this process. So to start with discrimination cases and processing. So the Civil Rights Department is tasked with enforcing our civil rights ordinance, and we do that largely through the work of our Complaint Investigations Division, which receives and investigates complaints of discrimination. The Complaint Investigations Division is a small but mighty team made up of an Associate Director of Civil Rights, 4 investigators, and 2 intake coordinators who work on this every day, day in and day out here at the city. And we have jurisdiction to investigate complaints of discrimination if they happened within the city of Minneapolis and within the last year. We are a neutral body that does this work as a free city service. So you don't need to pay to participate in this process or to have us investigate your case. You also don't need a lawyer to represent you in our process, though folks are always welcome to have a lawyer represent them if they would like. Under the current kind of scheme of things, there are 15 different protected classes that are in our civil rights ordinance, and then there are 3 new ones proposed that we're going to discuss here today. And when we talk about discrimination, what we're very generally talking about is negative treatment based on a person's protected class. As a general rule, a protected class is something about your identity that you cannot or should not be asked to change. Traditional protected classes folks are most familiar with are things like race, sex, sexual orientation, religion, religion, disability, and the like. And just as for some historical context, the last update to our civil rights ordinance was in 2017, and those changes went into effect in 2018. Before I jump into the details of these protected classes, I do want to show a very short video that I think gives a good overview of the work that we do in the Complaint Investigations Division. What can folks expect if they're engaging in our process? And then I will move on to the new things that we are here to talk about today.
What is discrimination under the Minneapolis Civil Rights Ordinance? Occurs when you're treated negatively because of your protected class, including race, disability, sex, national origin, age, gender identity, religion, and more. The Minneapolis Civil Rights Ordinance protects you from discrimination in the workplace, where you rent, where you interact with city employees, including the police, where you shop, bank, or get other services, and in many more areas. The ordinance also protects you from retaliation. Even if you're not sure something is covered by the ordinance, please submit a complaint, because even if our office can't investigate it, we can help you find resources or guide you where a complaint can be filed. It's important that you document the discrimination. Write down details close to the time it occurred while it's still fresh in your memory. Also, try to keep track of the dates and times of things that made you feel discriminated against. Keep relevant emails, text messages, voicemails, letters, photos, and videos. If there are witnesses to your experience, ask them to write down what they saw and get their contact information. The Civil Rights Department highly encourages people to file a discrimination complaint, because after you file, your complaint is documented with the Civil Rights Department, which makes the city aware of possible discrimination. And in many cases, civil rights staff can help you draft a charge of discrimination, which is a legal document explaining your experience. To draft a charge of discrimination, the alleged discriminator must either attend a mediation session where you can reach a resolution together, or they must submit a response to the charges filed against them so we can investigate. We want you to know that the City of Minneapolis takes discrimination complaints seriously. Our goal is to protect and advance the civil and human rights of everyone who lives in, works in, and visits our city. To submit a complaint or find more information, go to our website or call 311.
So for an overview of the amendments that we're talking about today, so we're discussing 3 new proposed protected classes. Those are housing status, height and weight, and justice impact status. We're also talking about bolstered current protections that provide additional jurisdiction and a robustness to the protections that we currently have in our civil rights ordinance, as well as a variety of procedural changes that will hopefully help streamline and increase efficiency in our case processing. If passed, these amendments would go into effect on August 1st of 2025 this year. So moving into our new protected classes. So the first is housing status. This protected class would be defined as the state of having or not having a fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. And this class would be protected in the areas of employment, education, housing, and public accommodation. There is one exemption to this particular protected class, which is on the screen. It does not prohibit any distinction, differential treatment, inquiry, or determination on the basis of housing status when required or authorized by federal or state law, or when it is because of a legitimate business justification not otherwise prohibited by law. I do want to highlight one of the areas that I mentioned is public accommodation. I think employment, education, and housing are fairly straightforward, but folks might not be as familiar with what public accommodation means. And what that is any place where you would go to buy a good, receive a service, a place that's generally available to members of the public. Some of the kind of case examples or like real world examples of the types of cases that we could investigate if this protected class was included in our ordinance are things like an employee whose supervisor becomes aware that they are living out of their car and terminates them from employment shortly thereafter, citing their lack of reliability when there is no record of this employee actually having any sort of reliability concerns, right? And there being a potential perception, right, that because this person is currently living in their car, they can't be trusted to show up at work on time or show up at all, which is of course inappropriate and would therefore be a violation of our ordinance. Another example could be a landlord who refuses to provide a rental application to an individual, stating that they refuse to rent to homeless people, right? Like that again would show animus towards this person's potential housing status or even perceived housing status and denying them something based on that, which again would likely be a violation of the ordinance. I'm going to provide some scenarios kind of as we go through through this whole thing, hopefully to give people kind of a real world example of what we're talking about. I will just caveat that with that these are the types of things we would certainly investigate. There could, of course, be more facts, right, that we would look at, and it's hard to know without knowing a full situation whether something would violate an ordinance. So moving next to our next protected class, which is justice impact status. So that would be defined in our ordinance as the state of having a criminal record or history, including any arrest, charge, conviction, period of incarceration, or past or current probationary status. This protected class would apply in the areas of employment, education, professional organizations, housing, and public accommodation. And there are some more extensive exemptions for this particular protected class, I think reasonably so, because we all understand that there might be certain elements of a person's criminal record or criminal history that could legitimately impact the type of job that they might be able to receive, or other areas of where this protection would exist. And so some of those exemptions are: an employer can reasonably consider the relationship of criminal history to the duties of the position, considering these delineated factors. And there are 5 of them. One is whether the person was actually convicted of the offense. Number 2 is the length of time since the alleged offense or conviction. Number 3 is the nature and gravity of the crime or crimes. Number 4 is the age of the employee at the time the crime was committed. And number 5, any evidence of rehabilitative efforts offered in support of the employee. A really important piece here, too, is that in the employment setting, an employer cannot discriminate based on an arrest record alone if that arrest did not result in a conviction, except for pending criminal matters. And then I'll also highlight that state and federal licensing requirements would still apply. So if those exist for certain types of professions or working in certain settings, that would all remain the same. There are additional exemptions in education that are very similar. You have to consider that same list of factors, but then you also would be able to consider the effect on the ability to become licensed to practice the sought profession that someone might be going to school for, and whether that person's criminal record or history would impact that in any way. And then there's also some exemptions in housing. We largely, in the draft ordinance as it is, refer to our rental screening ordinance, which already has provisions around what needs to be considered if considering someone's criminal history or record in relation to renting them housing in any way. Some of the case examples of the real life things that we could investigate if this were to be a protected class under our ordinance is an employer who revokes employment offers for anyone whose background check comes back with any conviction record whatsoever without any reasonable assessment of how that conviction might relate to whatever job they are pursuing. So a good example of this could be someone who has a DWI conviction from 10 years ago and is applying to work as a receptionist in a dentist office, right? That employer would have a tough time demonstrating to the department how that would be reasonably, that conviction would be reasonably related to the job that that person was in fact seeking. Another real world example could be a hotel who refuses to allow someone to rent a room because of their publicly available criminal history. So maybe they did their own research and then made decisions based on that. That would be inappropriate under the ordinance if this were to pass. And then an additional example is a private college that has just a general no felony policy for admission, again, without considering the impact of licensure and just doing it on the basic idea that they just aren't interested in having folks with a felony conviction on their record participating in their educational environment. Moving next to height and weight. This is our third new proposed protected class. The definition of this class under the ordinance would be numerical measurement of total body height and total body weight. Height encompasses but is not limited to an impression of a person as tall or short regardless of numerical measurement. Weight encompasses but is not limited to an impression of a person's weight, fat, thin, etc., regardless of numerical measurement. This protected class would be protected in the areas of education, employment, professional organizations, business, housing, public accommodation, and public service. I have previously defined public accommodation, but just to provide some background on public service, that would be any sort of attempt to receive a city service or interactions with city staff. And then there is an exemption in this area as well, in the employment area, when height or weight prevents a person from performing the essential functions of the job, and no reasonable accommodation is available without undue hardship or posing a direct threat to the health and or safety of the individual or others. And then there's a similar exemption in public accommodation, housing, and education. Decisions based on height or weight criteria is reasonably necessary for the execution of normal operations, and no alternative action to reasonably take without undue burden or fundamentally altering the essential nature of program or services or posing a direct threat to the health and or safety of the individual and others. Some real world examples in that height and weight arena would be a prospective employee who's told during an interview that they look different from the folks in the models and photos in that particular establishment they are interviewing to work at because those individuals are smaller bodied than they are, and is later rejected for the position. That's something we could investigate under this protected class. And then similarly, a landlord who declines to rent to an individual, stating they don't think that a person that big can manage the 3 flights of stairs it would take to get to the unit. So again, examples of drawing connections, making inappropriate decisions based on someone's height or weight that shouldn't impact whether or not they're able to get a job or to rent a particular unit. So moving into bolstered current protections. So there's a few of these, and I'm going to go into some detail just to make sure that folks know what we're kind of referring to when we're talking about this. So one is that the amendments would require accommodation for religious observance. So right now under our ordinance, religious discrimination is prohibited. So you can't, for instance, fire someone because you find out that they practice a particular religion and you have some sort of animus towards that religion. But there is not language in the ordinance that requires accommodation for someone's religious beliefs. Generally, religious accommodations are going to be things like prayer breaks or providing time off to participate in a religious service of some sort. Additionally, the amendments would expand jurisdiction to investigate pay equity issues. So we've had this come up at the department before. So pay equity is an issue when you have 2 people that are working in the same job. They are of different protected classes. So maybe you have a male employee and a female employee who have the same sorts of experience and expertise in a particular area, and yet one person is being paid more than the other, right? So under the current scheme, under our current ordinance language, we were only able to investigate a situation like that if a pay decision had happened within the last year because of our jurisdictional constraints, if we can only investigate discrimination happening in the last year. But of course, as we know, folks don't always know what their coworkers make, right? And they might find that out well into their employment, well into when that initial pay decision was made. And so this amended language would allow for us to investigate this type of case as long as a paycheck had been cut within the last year. So it really expands our ability to do that. So say someone has been working at a place for 5 years making the same, hourly rate, and it's in year 5 that they find out that their male counterpart makes $2 more an hour, that's something they could still bring to us and we would still be able to investigate, whereas previously that might not have necessarily been the case. So that's a really important piece. Another bolstered protection is that we have always had a prohibition against race discrimination, of course, in our civil rights ordinance, but we have never actually had a definition of what race means. And so this is somewhat parallel to the Crown Act efforts at the state level to actually provide a definition of race that includes skin color, certain physical features, and hair texture and style, just to really make it clear that if the discrimination is based on those sorts of things that are certainly very much tied to race, that is something we can investigate as racial discrimination. Next, there are additional protections that mirror the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, which is a federal law, and provides additional protections to pregnant workers. Again, there has always been a prohibition against discrimination towards someone because they're pregnant. You cannot fire someone because you find out that they're pregnant, right? But there weren't necessarily requirements for any sort of accommodation for a pregnant person in the employment setting unless they were having a very medically complicated pregnancy that might constitute a disability, which would necessitate an accommodation. So what these protections do is they require that employers do provide maybe more minor accommodations to folks who might be experiencing a fairly uncomplicated pregnancy, but still might have some needs around that pregnancy in the workplace. Good examples of this might be being allowed to use a stool instead of being on your feet all day at work, carrying water with you, taking more frequent restroom breaks, things like that. And then we also have language that explicitly allows for the investigation of intersectional discrimination. And so that means discrimination based on multiple protected classes. Again, we're in the real world, and we know that like when people face negative consequences, negative actions, it's not necessarily going to be just because of one protected class. We all have many elements of our identity, many things about us, and there certainly can be combinations of those things about us that drive negative actions and could constitute discrimination. So maybe it's both someone's race and their sex, right? Or maybe it's someone's national origin and their gender identity. So this just explicitly allows for investigation of those types of situations where it really is a combination of different protected classes that's at issue. There's also additional language that expands the definition of familial status to include those residing with and caring for adults who are unable to care for themselves. And this expands familial status. Traditionally, this is for folks with minor children living with them, but this expands it to if they're caring for an adult that cannot care for themselves. Moving now on to the procedural updates. So there's a few different things in these amendments that we hope will streamline kind of our case processing and improve it in a variety of ways. One is there's language that simplifies the procedure to obtain subpoenas in our public hearing process. And then there's a variety of different provisions that relate to how appeals are reviewed in our process. So as many of you know, we work hand in hand with our Civil Rights Commission, which is made up of volunteer city residents that are passionate about civil rights and are appointed by the council and the mayor. And one of the really important pieces that the commission plays in our case processing is that they are the ones who are tasked with reviewing appeals of decisions that the department makes. And so a lot of these have to do with this kind of appeal process. So there is a standard of review that they currently use for appeals, but it's not included in the ordinance. So one of these amendments would allow for the codification of the currently used standard of review for appeals into the ordinance. Another would require that Civil Rights Commission review panels complete reviews and issue orders on appeals within 90 days, just to ensure that our cases continue to move as efficiently as they can. And then there's also a change that would allow for Civil Rights Commission review panels to include only one attorney member instead of two. So the commission has 21 members, only 6 to 8 of whom need to be attorneys. And so as you can imagine, requiring 2 attorneys to sit on each of those panels, which only consist of 3 commissioners, just does reduce our capacity to be able to move appeals through. So this would drop that down to 1 attorney member. There would still be 3 people on each of these panels, but only 1 would have to be an attorney member of the commission, and hopefully just allow for a more efficient processing of appeals. And then last, there's also an extension of the deadline to file a lawsuit after receiving a decision from the department from 45 to 90 days. This mirrors a recent change to the Minnesota Human Rights Act, and hopefully just provides folks more time to assess their options, maybe get an attorney if they need that to proceed with their case. So hopefully just makes it more accessible to folks. So that concludes my discussion of what is in the amendments. And next I'll talk about the racial equity impact of these amendments if they were to pass. So our hope and belief is that these proposed additional protected classes, as well as the bolstered protections and procedural updates, will have a significantly positive impact, particularly on BIPOC residents in the city of Minneapolis, but also folks that work in and visit our city. Due to historical and systemic inequity, BIPOC residents are more likely to have experienced things like housing instability, or to be justice impacted, or to experience pay inequity. Thus, these expanded protections will be particularly relevant to folks who have had those experiences. Additionally, the expanded definition of race very much takes into consideration what BIPOC folks might experience in relation to hair texture and potential racial discrimination. I'll also highlight that already under our current civil rights ordinance and our current enforcement in our civil rights department, race is the most common basis for a discrimination complaint, and that those complaints vast majority are coming from BIPOC individuals. And so they're interacting in our process that much more, and therefore increased efficiency in our process will hopefully benefit everyone who is making complaints with our office. Measuring impact. So if these amendments were to pass, we certainly acknowledge that there would need to be extensive engagement with community and education across both the enterprise and the wider city community to make sure that folks know that these protections exist and also know where to go if they do face discrimination on these bases. So we will certainly be tracking our outreach and engagement efforts and the impact of those outreach and engagement efforts. We'll be looking at, are we seeing increases in complaints being filed after we hold these types of sessions in community, and then also surveying folks to get their input as to how impactful our engagement efforts are in their day-to-day lives. And then generally we'll of course track the complaints we would receive under these new protected classes, but also in relation to those bolstered protections, complaints we would get from pregnant individuals, for instance, who are having trouble in their workplace. And then we would of course track positive case outcomes, whether that's a mediated settlement agreement in the case, whether it's a finding that discrimination did in fact occur, or a conciliated settlement in a case. And then I will end just with a huge thank you to all of our partners from the Civil Rights Department. I really want to thank the authors for bringing this forward, of course, and for all our collaborative work throughout this process. I also want to thank the staff, particularly in the Complaint Investigations Division, who have done a lot of work on this. And then I also, a huge shout out to our City Attorney's Office, and particularly Alex Kane, who has spent a lot of time working on these amendments. And then I also really want to highlight and uplift the engagement that the Minneapolis Civil Rights Commission has participated in this process. They've made a lot of really beneficial recommendations that really have made it into what became these amendments to the Civil Rights Ordinance. So appreciate all of their engagement. And then we engage with a variety of different government agencies and community partners that I've highlighted here on the screen: the Michigan Department of Human Rights, the City of Madison Civil Rights Department, the City of Atlanta, Councilmember Westmoreland and their Human Relations Council, as well as the Washington, D.C. Office of Human Rights. And then we worked with community partners, including the ACLU, Diversity in Practice, and the Wanton Injustice Legal Detail, Justice Impacted Individuals Voting Effectively, otherwise known as JIVE, and the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, NAFA. So a huge thank you to all of them for their engagement throughout this whole process. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation, Director McCondiata. Before we go to questions, I think what would be effective here is if we open the public hearing, and then if colleagues have questions, we can make sure that you can answer those questions, and then we can go into comments. So thanks so much. I will now open the public hearing. If you did not sign up yet, please sign up here as where I'm pointing, or by our clerks team who are waving. Each speaker is going to have 2 minutes to provide testimony. I would please ask that once you hear the beeper to please be respectful of the time so we can make sure the meeting progresses. There's a timer up here that has 2 minutes, and there's a noise when the time is up. But we are really excited to hear from all of you here today. So with that, our first speaker is, and sometimes the handwriting is a little difficult to read, so I just want to preface that, but I think it's Annie Jansen. Hi. Welcome.
Hello. I'm Annie Jansen, Minneapolis resident and founder and executive director of Radical Health Alliance. We are the first and only Minnesota-based nonprofit working to end size discrimination in Minnesota. Weight bias is currently the most prevalent form of bias, affecting 40% of U.S. adults. Among school-aged children, it is the most prevalent form of harassment and bullying. Sizeism has severe consequences, including depression, anxiety, and increased risk of suicidality. People in larger bodies are paid less for the same job and are more likely to be fired even when their job performance is good. Arguably, healthcare is the site of the most prevalent and extreme weight bias. 68% of people at the highest end of the weight spectrum report delaying both preventative care and when they're experiencing active symptoms. As a leader of the Twin Cities fat community with over 1,600 members, I see the stories of weight bias every day. It affects every aspect of life of Minnesotans, from children to the elderly. I personally experienced weight-based bullying as a kid, and it had significant impacts on my mental health. On top of the harm that I experienced from the bullying, no adult in my life was prepared to respond, left me to navigate the situation on my own. Ordinances like this will bolster initiatives to train educators to be equipped to intervene, stopping harm sooner and getting support to bullied kids. Support for protections like these are widespread and bipartisan. 75% of U.S. adults support workplace protections against sexism, and over 80% want to see government address weight-based bullying. Today, I am asking you to vote yes on Bill 00563. There's no doubt in my mind that this bill will be a major step forward for eliminating weight bias in Minnesota. I am proud to be a resident of the city that would be the first in the state to enact this critical amendment. A big thank you to everyone who has put the labor into this.
Thank you for being here. And next up we have Tigress Osborne. And if I misspell your name, if you can just correct it, because I want to make sure I get it correct and so the public knows. Thank you.
That was it, Tigress. Thank you. Thank you for allowing my testimony today, counselors. I'm the director of the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, NAFA. I'm here to speak on behalf of our Minneapolis members and supporters. NAFA has advocated for fat people for 56 years, and we co-founded the Campaign for Size Freedom to help Americans understand the need for laws against anti-fat discrimination. Size discrimination can hurt anybody, but when it comes to fat people, there's an assumption that while others deserve protection from the law, we should just lose weight if we want to avoid discrimination. This belief is relentless, showing up in peer attitudes and public policy. But the solution to injustice is not shrinking our bodies. 34 million people in the US every year experience size discrimination. That's 75 Minneapolises. That's a lot of people, and this is a serious issue that we're not taking seriously enough. For people of color, queer and trans folks, disabled folks, yes, housing impacted folks, yes, justice impacted folks, that discrimination partners with other kinds of discrimination to create even more barriers. If your doctor won't treat your actual ailment, if the court assumes you are a bad parent because of your size, if your boss assumes big folks can't do the job even though you can do it, if your school won't give you a desk and chair that you need, the problem is not fat, the problem is bias. No matter what size a person is, today, tomorrow, 10 years from now, that person deserves opportunity, accommodation, and fairness. And when we're not given those things, we deserve recourse under the law. Only 2 states and 7 cities in the US have any kinds of protections against size discrimination. I'm a guest in Minneapolis, but what I know about y'all is that you live by the Wellstone Creed. So if we all do better when we all do better, how do we do better for our fat friends and neighbors? This is the way. You become the 8th city. You vote yes on 563, and you let everybody know that this is a place where fair treatment for big people is a big deal. Thank you for hearing my testimony.
Thank you, Tigress. Next up, we have Alyssa Green. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Alyssa Green. I'm the chair of the Minneapolis Commission on Civil Rights, a licensed therapist, and work in children's mental health at the Minnesota Department of Health. I'd like to thank Council Members Chavez and Wansley for authoring this ordinance change and hearing the voices of the Commission to making these significant changes. I support the changes to this ordinance, but I want to speak specifically to the height and weight protection. I was introduced to size-inclusive practices through my clinical work with eating disorders. As a therapist, I saw how those in larger bodies received worse care, experienced more stigma, more assumptions about their behaviors, traits, values, and encouragement of disordered eating behavior to manipulate their bodies. These systemic impacts on someone's mental health and physical health are much larger than what one therapist can work on in eating disorder treatment with someone. I believe a common goal of many in Minneapolis is health equity, but an aspect that is often left out of equity efforts is addressing size stigma and inequities. The quote-unquote obesity epidemic and diet culture have led to widespread beliefs and practices that weight is easily changeable, within someone's control, and a strong indicator of health. While weight can be one indicator of health for individuals, ultimately the harm that weight stigma and discrimination have is more detrimental to health than itself. The pursuit of shrinking bodies has led to anxiety, depression, eating disorders, cardiovascular conditions, and numerous other conditions. We are again in a resurgence of weight loss drugs and thinness being a bodily ideal under the guise of health. While this ordinance rightly protects everyone regardless of their weight and height, it will protect the most vulnerable in our communities, which tend to be those in larger bodies due to stigma and discrimination. Those in larger bodies deserve equal access to housing, educational and employment opportunities, and the ability to participate in public services. This will lead to better health and mental health outcomes. I appreciate your time today and encourage you to support these ordinance changes.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kirsten Sharp. Sharp, yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Kirsten Sharp. The most people know me as Sage. My pronouns are they, them. I am a fat, queer, non-binary, BIPOC person. In my lifetime, I have been unhoused and in need of public assistance. My parents and ultimately myself have been impacted by the justice system. I am a licensed social worker and therapist. I work with people of varied identities and intersectionalities. I haven't quite made it to my second anniversary of living in Minnesota, but I can say it has been one of the best decisions I've made. I don't currently live in Minneapolis, but I have lived here and work with people that live here, and I receive many of my personal services in the city. Throughout history, we have seen what can happen when a small number of people decide that entire groups of humans are undesirable or less than. Discrimination, intolerance, and hate has resulted in slavery, concentration camps, housing insecurity, poverty, increased mental and physical health concerns, incarceration, war, and death. We should not have to add language to reduce discrimination and create consequences for organizations and people that choose to engage in hate and intolerance because we are all human. However, hate and intolerance have seeds sown in the very fabric and foundations of government and the society in which we live. We must be more specific about who is human. I implore you to expand this language. The city of Minneapolis has the opportunity to continue to be a leader in providing safety for all groups of people. Please don't squander it.
Thank you. Next up, we have Maurice Ward.
Good morning, or good afternoon. Maurice and I switched, so just a heads up. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Crystal DeAlenkar, and I'm here today in strong support of the proposed protected class ordinance updates. I first want to thank Jive, who invited me here to speak, for their leadership in fighting for the rights of some of the greatest victims of systemic violence. This ordinance is long overdue. It brings our civil rights laws in line with the realities our communities face today, especially justice-impacted individuals, those with a criminal record, who are routinely denied housing and jobs, not because they pose real risk, but because of stigma and policy rooted in punishment, not restoration. We continue to criminalize individuals responsible for just a tiny fraction of overall harm, while ignoring far greater crimes. Wage theft robs $50 billion a year, more than all other property crimes combined. Tax evasion, $1 trillion annually. Air pollution crime, it kills 100,000 people every year, several times more than all homicides combined. However you want to measure suffering and harm, these are the biggest contributors. Yet we reserve the harshest and most draconian consequences for those with the least power. This ordinance doesn't remove accountability. It simply says if you're going to deny someone an opportunity because of their record, you must show why. One must consider time past, rehabilitation, and whether there's a real risk to the job or housing in question, not blanket discrimination. We already know the justice system disproportionately punishes poverty and racialized communities, and we also know what actually reduces violence and harm: access to housing, education, healthcare, and stable employment. Hordes of research backs this up. In fact, two of the biggest predictors in reducing crime: early childhood education and Medicaid. Again, basic needs. Given all of the evidence, I leave you with this question. When an individual who has become incarcerated, likely due to lacking these dignities in the first place, has served their time and they are still denied the instrumental tools needed to rehabilitate, what results could we possibly expect? Denying these opportunities feeds the trauma and harm-inducing cycle. So I ask you today to please support this long overdue ordinance update. Thank you all.
Thank you. And if you can please make sure we got your name because of the switch. We just want to make sure. Thank you. And you can work with our clerk up there. Yeah, thank you. Next up, we have Gregory Gibson. Okay. Oh, okay. I get it now. Okay. Cool.
Good evening. I don't have all the facts and statistical data. I am running for Ward 5 City Council, and that in itself is something that that being justice impacted allowed me to force myself into that position. Now, when I came home, I was when I say came home, I came home from prison. Being justice impacted, my PO told me I have 60 days to find a place and find employment. And when he told me that, I didn't understand the implications of having a felony on my record because of ban the box and things like that. I ended up going back to prison for an infraction because I could not find a job and I could not find housing. So you got to understand that with these discriminations that are biases that we experience is the reason why we recidivate in so high numbers, because it's difficult when you go apply, and it's discerning. It's going back to my family after applying for a job and being told I have the job to find out 7 days later did a criminal background check and I don't have the job is demoralizing. And being as old as I am, to explain to my wife that I can't find employment, it makes me less than the provider of my family. So you got to understand there's a lot of different things that go on through this discrimination and bias that has a rippling effect into our communities. This is not new. The nation is moving toward justice impacted. Atlanta has passed it. Gainesville, Florida has passed it. Chicago is looking at it statewide. So Minnesota being as progressive as it is, I just ask for you to pass this on May 1st. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we had Brad Fedig. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Brad Fedig. I am here on behalf of Jive. I have been incarcerated twice from 2006 to 2012 in state and federal prison. During that time, I was on parole I made it for 10 months, and there was nothing but wanting to go back to prison because there was no help for me to survive. Like you can't pay rent, you can't pay your bills. So I went back to selling drugs like I was. Upon release from federal prison, I struggled many years. I wanted to go back for 3 years. Lost many relationships because of my struggles. There really is no rehabilitation in prison whatsoever. Any rehabilitation is done on your own. And any integration back into the community is done on your own or with the help of private, community groups or friends. Fortunately, I wouldn't be able to find a place to live if I didn't have some friends that were to help me. So I'd just ask that there be some help for people being released from prison and starting fresh. You can't even get Minnesota state assistance if you have a felony, at least as far as an EBT card, at least. But medical insurance is, I can't speak the facts on that, but that is likely an issue to receive benefits. It is incredibly hard to get there.
Thanks, Brad.
I figured it out.
And thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. And I can't read the handwriting on this next one, but I think it's JAU. Sorry. And if you can say your name, I apologize.
Good afternoon. My name is Chiron, and I'm also impacted by the justice system. I can say I am a parent of 3, have suffered homelessness several times, have a great work background, been hired on more than 5 jobs, explain in interview my background, receive the job, start the job, then have to clear my desk up or ask to be removed because upper management has decided they don't want to go further. Along with, I was granted Section 8. I lost my Section 8 because I have a background, a criminal background, and I couldn't find a place that would rent to me because of my background, along with the help of Beyond Backgrounds that pays additional $2,000. If they rent to you, they still don't accept that. So it's important. As a mother, I'm not a lazy mother. I like to feed my children well, take care of them like a mother's supposed to. But being that the way things are now, it's a hard thing. We make bad decisions, but people do grow from that. But to be getting smacked in the face like you just did that bad decision 24 hours prior is not a good feeling. And it's not a good example for your children while you're raising your children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kat Polivoda.
Hi, thanks for hearing from us today. I'm Kat Polivoda. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a small business owner here in Minneapolis. I have a plus-size resale shop in the Hale Page Diamond Lake neighborhood, close to Lake Nokomis. This year, it is 8 years with the brick and mortar there, which is, it's been a little bit of a journey. But I'm here today because I support all of these changes, but I especially want to speak to the height and weight protections that are being pursued today. Hearing from many people's comments, I'm thinking about like Annie and Tigris who spoke first. Those stories and examples, along with the examples that are part of the presentation, like because I am a member of the fat community, because all of my customers are fat people, folks who wear plus size clothing, I hear and see examples just like that, like on a regular basis, It's wild to be a shop owner and like have that sense of community in that space and hear the beautiful and the not so beautiful things happening in people's lives. And examples that you've heard today are true. It's like I hear from parents about their kids being bullied in school because of their size. I hear about folks who suspect some anti-fat bias is happening like in that hiring process when they're looking for jobs. I hear about and have close friends who have been denied necessary medical treatments or have waited way too long to get the help that they need. My shop also does fat pool parties that are really exciting and everyone loves them. But the reason why is because for fat folks, like being at the pool with other fat people in that space is sometimes the only time they've been at a pool and not felt like they're going to be harassed or judged or singled out because of just wearing a swimsuit and doing life in their bodies. As a small business owner, I also support this. It's not hard to, be able to protect, to want to protect folks' civil rights. And if I'm not, I want to know, and I want to do better, and I want to be in a city with other business owners who feel the same way. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Antonio Williams. And then if folks haven't signed up and would love to sign up, please work with our clerks up here.
Thank you, council members. My name is Antonio Williams. I served 14 years and 2 weeks in the Department of Corrections. But I'm not going to talk about the discrimination that I faced. I'm going to talk about what I do after coming home. I came home June 22nd, 2020, almost 5 years ago. And I started an organization called Tone Up, teaching ourselves new examples to uplift our people. And what we do is we resource justice-impacted people, people who have come home after serving time. And it is our job to connect people with resources, a network, and give them hope. That job has become harder and harder because as they see themselves represented in a place where they're seeing themselves fight for each other and help each other come back and find, a pathway towards real healing, they're seeing discrimination at the same time. They're seeing people, organizations, and their city say, cool, you served your time, but you still have to do more. You're still not welcomed here. What we have is a crisis. We're being discriminated against in violent ways. Everyone who has been released from prison and who doesn't have a home, who doesn't have a way to feed themselves or their children is in a state of crisis. And so when we have businesses, when we have people, when we have elected officials who think it's okay to continue that violence, that discrimination that is enhancing and contributing to crisis in people's lives, we need to stand up as a community and say enough is enough. And I implore our city, I implore people who give people opportunities like jobs, housing, and other things to think about this. 95% of people who are in prison will be coming home. Do we want those folks to come home feeling like they're a part of this community or still feeling disconnected, still feeling like they have to get out there, steal a car, rob somebody, snatch a purse so that they can feed their family, so that they can put clothes on their backs? Please support this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Amy Bergquist. Amy Bergquist, number 12. We can move on to the next one, but if Amy arrives... Oh, okay, cool. Perfect. Hi, Amy.
Thanks. It's quite a sprint from the overflow room. Thank you so much, Chair Chavez and Vice Chair Wansley and council members for being here today. I'm really excited about the ordinance changes. My name is Amy Bergquist, and I have served on the Civil Rights Commission in the city of Minneapolis since 2014, so 11 years. And I just want to talk about two minor things, but I think they're really significant. I submitted written comments, so I'm not going to talk about that first one that's really tiny, but I want to talk about the second one, which really shows that there's a danger these changes will give with one hand and take away with the other. And that has to do with what Director McConnell-Diarra referred to as increasing efficiency in the case processing, and specifically the codification of the standard of review. Now that sounds really technical and not nearly as exciting as all these other changes, so I'll try to be brief, but I do think that the codification will have a negative racial impact and will make it harder for the commission to do its job. And this goes back to the institutional history in my 11 years on the commission. There have been at least 4 different directors of the Complaint Investigation Division, and so understandably there's some issues with institutional memory. But back in 2019, the commission and the department reached an agreement that if the commission is remanding a case for further investigation, that standard of review doesn't apply. We reached an agreement, and now the department says they can't find that agreement in their records. The point, and I submitted sort of evidence that there was this discussion, there was a meeting, there's this agreement, the city attorney's office chimed in. And what does that mean? Why, if we're remanding a case for the department to do more investigation, we don't want to have to find that there was clear error on the part of the department. That is actually going to make it harder for people to bring their claims and to get their claims, get a fair hearing. So as an example, if somebody says that an employee was discriminated against, well, I'll refer to my written statements, but I really encourage you to take a look at what I've submitted in writing, and please don't codify the standard review just yet. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Next up, we have Paul Sullivan.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Sullivan, and I am an organizer with the American Civil Liberties Union of Minnesota. I've had the honor of working with the Justice Equity Coalition and Council members Wansley and Chavez's office to make justice impacted status a protected class in the city of Minneapolis. The ACLU of Minneapolis believes strongly, of Minnesota, believes strongly that this addition is an important step forward for the constitutional rights to due process, ensuring that people do not suffer punishment extracurricular to that handed down to them by a court of law that they were not sentenced to. I'm also here today to deliver a short message from Bridget Simpson, the organizer in Atlanta, Georgia, who pioneered protected class classification for justice-impacted folks. As she says, and I quote, "Greetings from Atlanta, Georgia. My name is Bridget Simpson. I am the executive director of Bard Businesses. I lead the Protected Class Network. I'm a justice-impacted woman, an advocate for social and economic justice for those who are justice impacted. In October 2022, we successfully passed an ordinance in Atlanta, Georgia that added justice impacted people to the protected class status. We know from firsthand experience that being justice impacted can mean being locked out of jobs, housing, education, parenting, even long after sentences are completed. This creates a cycle of poverty, insecurity, and hopelessness. But when we pass policies like this one, we're opening doors. We're saying economic stability, humanity, and opportunity belong to us all. Minneapolis's ordinance is a bold, necessary step towards equity and healing. Justice-impacted people are our neighbors. They are our co-workers, our community leaders. Let's protect their rights and build a city where everyone has a real shot at a second chance and humanity and success. I can't say it better than she did. The ACLU fully agrees with what she said, and we really hope to see this as a victory for due process and a victory for the rights of every person in Minneapolis. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Danelle. I forgot your. It's hard to read, but it's a C-H-R? No? Maybe not. Number 14. Or from Jive.
She may be in the overflow room.
Danelle. What's your name? You're next, but you can come up. How about we start with you next, and then we'll figure out if number 14 is here. But if Jamel, you come here. But the person I was looking for is Danelle Christener. Cool. Welcome,
Hello.
Jamel.
Hi, my name is Jarl Perry. I own a company called Make It Home, and I'm a proud member of Jive. The reason why I'm speaking today is more out of experience of life. When you're young and the first thing you do after you get out of school is go to college. As soon as I entered college, I ended up getting a felony on my record, which stopped me from being able to get those grants. After I took care of the process of getting my life back together, tried to come back home, to my mom's house, and could not live there. And then when she actually did let me live there, she lost her housing because she had me living in her home. So that made us all homeless, made me someone, an outcast, a pariah, someone that you can't have in your home. Not only did not do nothing that severe, now that no matter where I go, I am always seen as more of a problem than the problem I actually had. Even to this day, I wanted to say more about that. And I know plenty of people, even nowadays, where they've been arrested or they end up in handcuffs because they're having an altercation, a conversation, an argument just because they have something on their record. What I've seen happen, and it's actually happened to me as well, where you have an argument, and then once it gets broken up, the officer usually looks at you both and says, hey, what's your name? And then they go and put it in a computer, and then it pumps out everything that you've done wrong in your life. And usually on that judgment alone, they figure out if you're going to sit in the cell for the night or you're going home. And that should not be a factor at all, especially when we're talking about human beings that live their life each and every day. Someone that's coasted their whole life, done great their whole life, can be lying in this situation, and it can tear another person, another life apart. So thank you. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. I'll name again Danelle if you're not here. Otherwise, is it you? Hi.
Good afternoon. Thank you for hearing my testimony today, Council. My name is Danelle Kreisner, and I am Jive. I'm a justice-impacted individual who was sent to what you guys call a rehabilitation center, aka prison. I did my time. Prison is not a rehabilitation center, but that's not the situation at hand. I did my time. I came home, and I thought that my sentence would be over. It's not. I'm a single mother who has fought in a community to thrive. When I apply for a job or housing, I'm immediately accepted. It's not that my credentials aren't there. It's not that my value isn't there. I hold value to any company that I come to. I get the job until my background is run, and then I'm immediately denied. I'm a single mother who has no choice to be a single mother, who is forced to live in communities below poverty rate, that are above crime rate. This is no place for me to have to raise my child. And I'm faced with that because I'm denied for housing because I am justicely impacted. Not because of who I am or what I stand for today or what I was before I was justly impacted. People make mistakes. They pay for them. We should not have to pay for the rest of our lives because of a crime that was committed. I strongly agree with this ordinance, and we need this ordinance passed. This needs to be a light that's brought upon everybody's heads and in everybody's eyes, because it's more than what we imagine it to be. And it's not only impacting me now as a justice-impacted individual, it is impacting our future generations, because it instills something in them that suppresses them mentally, emotionally, and it impacts them for their futures, because they don't think they can thrive, because they see their parents and their community not being able to do the same thing, because we are therefore justly impacted. Thank you for hearing me today.
Thank you. And next up we have Ronald Brown.
Thank you for having me. My name is Ronald Brown. I'm here on behalf of John. By show of hands of everybody in the room, who's all been 19 and done at some point? That's pretty much everybody in the room, right? 1994, I was 19 and done. I had an unregistered firearm illegally. 30 years later, I get a job at a nursing home, 2021. I tell the truth about my background. They hired me. I got hired during COVID, where you couldn't go to the sheriff's department to get your fingerprints done. Well, 2 years later, into the job, they had me go get COVID lifted. They had me go get the fingerprints. It comes back 30 years ago, firearm charge. DHS tells the nursing home they have to fire me. My first year at the nursing home, I made Employee of the Month twice. My second year at the nursing home, I got nominated for Servant Leader of the Year. I never was late. I never called in. I never had a problem at work. I paid my dues 30 years ago, but I still lost my job 30 years later. Justice impacted. Please pass it. Protect us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up we have Marcel, and if you haven't signed up, this is the last testifier that we have right here, so please sign up. And I think it's Marcel Hofker. Oh.
Hello, my name is Marcel Hofker. I am justice impacted, post-incarcerated. I'm an entrepreneur, a business owner, and working for the state with DEED, working with men and women coming out of the federal system. Today, I didn't hear anybody come up and talk about the benefit for business. as the owner of a staffing company, I have worked with many companies where I go in, and it's not hidden that I'm bringing them justice-impacted individuals. And what I hear from HR departments all over the city is that they would love to hire people with backgrounds. It never makes it past legal. It would be freeing up business to hire these people if we pass this ordinance. Because businesses want to hire people with backgrounds, but there's some companies who just have blanket statements. We don't hire felons, or it doesn't meet their sensibility. But if we can pass this and make it easier for a company to, I mean, if it's 5 years and it disappears, they can hire you. You know, let's make it easier for companies to hire people with records. This would make it easier for them. Set that limit. Let them know that at this point, that's not even something they can judge somebody on. And without that freedom, we're going to keep having the same issues because companies are beholden to their legal departments, and their legal departments are not the HR departments. They're not the people who meet the human that is interviewing. So let's free up these companies to hire people and pass an ordinance like this that will allow that. That's all I got.
Thank you. Last call for public testimony. All right, seeing that no one else wishes to speak on this item, I will now close the public hearing and open the forum to my colleagues who might have comments or questions. The first person on queue is Council President Payne.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. I just got in queue to thank all of you for coming and advocating on this, and to thank you, Chair Chavez and Vice Chair Wansley, and our Civil Rights team, our Civil Rights Commission. This is just extremely, extremely timely. We're in an era when our federal government is moving to strip rights away. It's our job here at the local level to build those rights up and build those civil liberties up and make sure that our staff have the resources that they need to deliver on those protections. So I just think that this is really meeting this moment, and I'm just very grateful that this was brought forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I got a lot of this understanding from the comments that were offered in the public hearing, but I am curious from the director of the department or the authors where all of this came from. Did it come from civil rights commission meetings? Pardon me. And it seems like it largely came from community. And I'm just curious what other ads were maybe made to it by authors and how you met with them. I'm just kind of looking for how this kind of grew into this. And it's beautiful and I'm supportive, but I'm just curious as to how it all came about. We've heard from a couple of those impacted groups.
For sure. Do you want to go first, Director, and then I can tackle it? Because it's been a mix of so much throughout this process.
Chair Chavez, Councilmember Palmisano, thank you very much for the question. So I mean, I think there was a lot of collaboration throughout this whole process between the authors, the Civil Rights Department, and our community partners and our Civil Rights Commission especially. I will highlight that many of the bolstered current protections were specific recommendations from the Civil Rights Department, and we were very happy to work with the authors on those, and I will turn it over to you all to talk more about protected classes.
Yeah, so initially, there was conversations I had with community members about immigration status, what other cities are doing across the country. This was almost a year-long conversation, and then housing status. And then when I was working on it, Margaret Anderson Kelleher talked about how, the Civil Rights Department and City Operations Officer Margaret Anderson Kelleher had talked about how the Civil Rights Department was already trying to do some work around civil rights changes to the ordinance. So we figured that since Councilor Wansley and I were exploring some changes to the Civil Rights Ordinance, staff was already thinking about making changes, which was highlighted in one of the slides when it comes to folks that are pregnant and so forth. We figured that we could work together on this ordinance to make sure that we bring it forward as one package. So a lot of the recommendations came from civil rights staff. Now, when it came to housing status, justice impacted status, and weight and height, those came from community. The height and weight component came from the Civil Rights Commission. There are many different organizations here today who have been advocating for this stuff in Minneapolis and across the state. So that was where the Civil Rights Commission, Alyssa, folks from the community have been advocating for that. So that was a change that we heard from the Civil Rights Commission, and it was never actually included in our ordinance until we heard that from the Civil Rights Commission, and that's how we included that part. the housing status was just from advocates, folks making sure that there's less discrimination when people are seeking housing in general. Initially, we were working with like folks that were unhoused as a protected class, but after working with our civil rights department, we focused on housing status to make it more in alignment with how the ordinance is written. So that's how we wrote it. And then when it came to justice impacted, I'll pass that to Vice Chair Wansley because that was,
Thank you, Chair Chavez. And I do want to note also that this has been nearly a year-long effort with you giving notice of this ordinance last May of 2024. So we're almost coming full circle in reconciling this. But following the voter registration or restoration efforts at the state level, I know my office has been in conversations specifically with the ACLU and a number of groups who led that charge to also explore what are efforts we could do at the municipal level to honor the under-recognized protections that justice-impacted communities are often denied. And when I became aware that Councilmember Chavez gave notice for the Civil Rights Ordinance to be revisited, we were approached by ACLU, Jive, saying that this is actually the perfect opportunity to revisit or look at how to add justice impacted as a protected clause. So again, really being responsive to the subject matter experts in our communities who are helping us guide policy, and in this case, unfortunately, from their lived experience of being denied basic protections in their civil liberties. So I'm very grateful for our staff and for Council Member and Chair Chavez and the Civil Rights Commission for being receptive of our community's expertise and feedback and incorporating these provisions so that many of our community members who often don't feel seen feel very visible in this ordinance.
And I'll just add one more part, if you don't mind, Councilor Palmisano. Initially, the way we had submitted a notice of intent, and then it was referred to staff, and we ended up amending that notice of intent because we had further conversations with the Civil Rights Department and how we would rather go towards a partnership in moving this policy forward. But yeah.
Thank you so much for all of you sharing this origin story and this evolution of our civil rights ordinance. I do have a question that I'll take offline about what Ms. Bergquist had mentioned about codifying the standard of review potentially having negative consequences, but I'll take that offline and confer with the authors once I understand it fully. I didn't understand it in that very short review of it. Thank you for all of this work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Councilmember Palmisano. Vice Chair Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. I just want to reiterate thanks to our staff and to our community partners, specifically Jive and the ACLU and our commission and Chair Chavez. I'm already getting emotional because the testimony that you all shared for each additional protected clause that we're considering today was just extremely powerful. But I'm thinking, of course, as someone who is bringing forward the justice impacted one, of how that really hit home as someone who is currently supporting a loved one who spent 15 years going back and forth in prison and seeing, in spite of every best rehabilitation efforts, that individual, as you all highlighted, feel less than human, and having to respond to what is a deterioration in that person's mental health right now because they've been denied their basic protections. And it's because of them that I feel very honored and grateful to be able to bring this work forward, to hopefully never have someone else be put in the predicament of my loved one. So I just want to say thank you all for supporting us in getting to this place and for lending your vulnerable and powerful testimonies for us to shape this policy. And I do this with my loved one in mind, especially today. So I just want to say thank you all. And as Council President Payne said, I'm also feeling really grateful to be in this position where we're seeing a federal administration under the current president that is going on a just all-out attack on so many of our communities and weaponizing our differences to harm us, and to be in a place where, as policymakers, we actually are on the offense and are proactively bolstering protections for some of our most vulnerable communities and residents. And I really hope, as many of you all communicated, that Minneapolis, in passing this, can be a beacon of light for so many cities and other places that feel as if they have to capitulate to the hate and intolerance that is being spread across the country right now, and feel that they have to retreat because of the fear that's also being spread by this administration, and know that there's places like Minneapolis, there's places like the folks who spoke in our community today, and the elected officials who are on this body who support this work, and staff who have led on this work, to know that there is a bigger movement of people in our world, in our nation, in our city, who are here to move beyond that hate and intolerance and see power in our differences. And I'm so grateful that we get to be that beacon of light. And I'm so grateful to be in a place where we have brilliant, amazing folks like those who testified today. So I just want to say thank you all. And it's days like this where I feel grateful to be in this position and reminded of the privilege of being in this position. So I just want to say thank you. And with that, I really encourage all of my colleagues to support this. This is one of those policy opportunities where we should feel proud of a policy action that we get to take that actually aligns with the values that we say our city upholds. So I hope that this is one where it's not only a unanimous vote amongst this committee, but I hope and expect that it's one, once it makes it, assuming it passes here, amongst full council next Thursday as well. So with that, I will pass it to my co-author, Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wansley, and I just want to thank our staff in the City Attorney's Office and Civil Rights Department, Gail, Alex, Michelle Phillips, Menier. A whole bunch of staff members worked really hard. If you see, this ordinance is so long. There are many pages that took a lot of work from our civil rights staff or the City Attorney's Office. I know that part of this is also having like our little own work group meetings. We met a lot. A lot of conversations, and I think that's the thing I wanted to highlight today, because I think it's a part of policy making of how city administration staff, our city staff, our own ward offices, how council members and community can all work together. I talked about it when we passed our street vendor ordinance just last week. This was a similar process of how good work can happen when we're all collaborating with one another, and I just want to at least highlight and thank city staff for the amount of work that they all put in to this. I want to thank Vice Chair Wansley. We worked a lot with our staff on this ordinance. I think it's really important. And most importantly, I want to thank the community members that are here, and I'm going to miss some folks, but there's some folks that testified today that I know that without the advocacy that you all have been pushing for in this city and in this state, it would not even be possible to even have this conversation in Minneapolis. We heard from the Radical Health Alliance, National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, helping folks from the Campaign for Size Freedom, New Justice Project, Minnesota Freedom Fund. We heard from the Civil Rights Commission. We know that we had a lot of conversations with the Civil Rights Commission. It was a great time hearing their feedback. Tone Up ACLU. I know that we had hope for the diversity in practice, Wanton Justice Legal Details, Jive, and many other people. I'm sorry if I'm forgetting, but I try to take note of people that were testifying with different organizations. This is the kind of work that community has been pushing for, and we're just here trying to pass a policy to help give justice to the work that our community has been advocating for a very long time. So I at least want to acknowledge the amount of organizations and staff and community members that have been pushing for this kind of work to happen for a very long time. And I'll say more at the full council meeting, but I at least want to acknowledge the public and thank our city staff for the work that they did. We know that there was a lot of work from both the Civil Rights Department and City Attorney's Office, and it takes all of us to move this forward. So, I mean, if you look at the ordinance, there are bolstering workplace protections. We're talking about texture of hair, housing status, weight, and height. We're talking about justice impacted. This ordinance is comprehensive. There are many different communities that are here testifying today, and that is beautiful. That is what I love about this ordinance. There are so many different communities together saying we can improve protections for our residents here in Minneapolis, and we can bring people together to celebrate this moment. And I know we still have to pass it at full council, but I am very grateful for the public for coming here today, so, and our staff. So I wanted to at least mention that. All right. So, seeing no further questions, I'll move approval of this item, and I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Rainville.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Vice Chair Wansley.
Aye.
Chair Chavez.
Aye.
There are 5 ayes.
And that carries, and it has been forwarded to the full council meeting. And thank you all for being here today. Our final item, and sorry for making you all wait this long, but it is receiving and filing an overview of the 2025 Summer Safety Plan in response to a legislative directive that this body and full council passed. Here to kick off this item is the Commissioner of the Office of Community Safety, Todd Barnett. We have other staff from the Office of Community Safety. And we can give it a little bit because I know that the presentation was here longer, so we'll wait. Welcome. Welcome up, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Chavez, Council President Payne, Councilmember Rainville. I'm sure Councilmember Wansley will join us, and Councilmember Palmisano is here as well. I'm Todd Barnett, the Commissioner of Community Safety for the City of Minneapolis. We are here to give an overview of the summer planning from all 5 of our departments. The order we're going to go in is that I'll talk about the large planned events. I enjoy doing that. Minneapolis Police Department will talk about their Safe Summer. Also, we have the fire department to talk about their operations, neighborhood safety, we'll talk about their programming. Of course, we'll hear from 911, our emergency communications center, and emergency management will talk about the severe weather preparedness. And each one of those department heads will introduce themselves. Planned events. Of course, we have Pride coming back this year at the end of June. We have the Saloon Block Party here July 27th to the 29th. We have the International Soccer Gold Cup quarterfinals on the 29th, Taste of Minnesota in July. And then again, we have Open Streets August 2nd, Central Avenue, Cedar Avenue on August 17th, West Broadway on September 8th, and Hennepin Avenue on the 20th. And then, you know, as we've done for several years, we have the Twin Cities Marathon in October, going through the 3rd through the 5th. And, you know, as usual, we'll have additional events that will occur throughout the summer for the city of Minneapolis, and we will support the safety in each one of them with our other justice partners as well. So that's a quick update on all of our planned events. I'll ask that AC Blackwell come up for Minneapolis Police. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome up.
Thanks, Commissioner. Good afternoon, President Payne, Chair, council members. I'm Katie Blackwell, Assistant Chief of Operations, and I'm always excited to talk about crime and public safety. So I'm going to provide a year-to-date overview, just a brief one on violent crime. Then our focus enforcement details, our risk train modeling, also known as RTM, our summer initiatives, and our mission objectives, and our concept of operations. So on this slide is our gun crime year-to-date from January 1 through April 14th this year. On this slide, negatives are positive. So if you look at 2025 versus 2024 year-to-date, you'll see everything has significantly decreased in crime. And then additionally on the far right, you'll see the 28-day percentage showing this past 28 days versus last year, the last 28 days. So for instance, non-negligent homicides, we are at 0 this year in the last 28 days versus last year at 6. So we have had a 67% reduction in non-negligent homicides, a 35% reduction in gunshot victims, 33% reduction in shooting incidents, 33% decline in carjackings, and 20% in gun violence index, and then aggravated assaults are also significantly down.
And AC Blackwell, just so the public doesn't get confused, please note that this is as of April 14th, just in case I know the media's here. They should know the particular date because that may have shifted since then, but I just wanted to at least publicly note that in case there's questions.
Thank you, Chair. So this is part of the RTM, the risk train modeling. We basically use the risk train modeling. It helps us understand why crime exists in an area and what makes it attractive for criminal behavior based on the geographical makeup of that location. And from RTM, we created RAPID. And RAPID is risk-based analysis for proactive patrol, intervention, and deterrence, which I'll get into in the next few slides. So in this risk train modeling maps that you'll see on the far left is basically the risk factors that I'll get into for gun crimes. It's just areas that we identify as higher risks for gun crimes. In the middle picture here, you'll see the density of risk factors for gun crimes citywide. So the first one on the left was neighborhoods. The one in the middle is more density for citywide. And then the far right is where we take our risk factors for gun crimes versus where gun crimes actually occur, and we overlap them. And with that, that helps us determine where we're going to deploy our resources and our patrols in these overlapping areas to prevent and mitigate crime. So there are other risk factors or other types of crime and disorder that are unique ones, and they may have stronger influences on livability offenses, but not affect or an increase on gun crime. So it isn't about one risk factor, but about the confluence of various risk factors at any specific location. So we recognize operationally our strategies that RTM is a tool. It doesn't itself reduce crime, but it's how we use it. So officers are expected to commit to one 15-minute patrol, a high visibility patrol throughout the day of their shift, putting their police lights on, getting out, engaging with community members and business owners. And then we log it in our what's called the ArcGIS system. It's just a web app built by our MPD crime analysts at no cost. Thought you'd appreciate that. So the biggest thing is that we're piloting this we have been piloting it in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th precincts. And we just are starting to pilot it today in the 1st precinct, which will eventually grow into the 2nd precinct. But inside the roll call rooms, officers can grab their phones, they can scan a QR code, and it gives them the crime maps in these rapid-based deployment areas where they need to focus on. They update weekly, so they know where to go and hit what hotspots to hit, whether on patrol. So accountability and just evaluation of the metrics. Every 4 weeks, focus areas are reevaluated for efficiency and new emerging crime patterns. Squad deployments are tracked daily to ensure officers are spending time in the right places. And our data analysis, they are really reviewing that data, and then also our inspectors at each of the 5 precincts, as well as we have 2 crime meetings a week to include our Minneapolis crime statistics meeting, where we really deep dive into where the patterns are occurring. Is there having an effect on crime in the area? Do we need to adjust our resources or change things up? So our focus enforcement details, we've had 4 so far year to date. We've also had smaller details to include robbery suppression details. But our objective is collaborate and deploy organized resources using data analytical tools that have the highest likelihood to impact gun-related violence throughout the year. So as we approach into Safe Summer 4, basically Safe Summer is typically 1 week of these focus enforcement details, both during the day and at night. We have both state and federal partners, and we also coordinate investigations with Hennepin County Attorney's Office and the U.S. Attorney's Office. So this says Safe Summer 4 on it, but it's Safe Summer 3 data that I wanted to bring into place because we haven't done Safe Summer 4 yet as we approach summer. But last year, during Safe Summer 3, we had 98 arrests, 45 firearms recovered, over 2,300 grams or 5 pounds of narcotics recovered, and that's a large variety of different narcotics from cocaine, meth, heroin. And then we recovered 1,263 fentanyl pills in that week alone. So some additional strategies, we're partnering with the BCA, Violent Crime Reduction Unit, to focus on violent offenders. And that really is just a collaboration effort on violent crime, and they assist us with a lot of different types of violent investigations. And then we'll continue our late night safety plans. It's been very effective downtown, and we extended that into Dinkytown and Uptown. And then our curfew task force, obviously the chief addressed the 2024 rising juvenile crimes. We're continuing with this, especially late nights and on weekends. And we're combining it with law enforcement and a community approach. It's really to prevent youth violence and identifying at-risk youth. Along with, this is really an overall wellness check for juveniles and our officers and investigators that have conducted these late night, part of the late night safety plan, as well as going to their houses to check on these at-risk youth, have gained a lot of good relationships with families, and it's been very successful with trying to prevent them from being higher risk, and also even just getting them resources that they might need, like mental health or other types of resources the families might need. And then additionally, we're going to continue with the robbery and violent crimes response protocols. We're going to follow up with gangs and the RICO cases with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Our staffing plan to include new standby options for certain units, specifically traffic unit and juvenile unit. The juvenile unit being on call helps us with, if we have a juvenile crime spree, we can jump on that, call them in, and they can start investigating these crimes. And then traffic unit has been on call when we have serious fatalities involving vehicles, accident-related deaths. So I will bring up Assistant Chief Gators to discuss some of the community engagement.
Thank you. Welcome up, AC Gators. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members, and President Payne. Christopher Gators, Assistant Chief of Community Trust and Engagement Branch of the Minneapolis Police Department. Real briefly, I'd just like to kind of get you up to speed on our community engagement and kind of what we're doing in the future here in the months to come. As far as the police department, as you know, the chief has said many times over, and the staff as well, community engagement is a part of all of our policing efforts, and to include our summer safety plan. On your screen, what you'll see is just a brief snapshot of what we're trying to do here in the short term, in the months to come. And as far as the focus, we're investing in engagement with our summer approach, and what we're trying to do is ramp it up right now. Over the winter months, we do this community engagement all year round, but over the summer months, as we get into the summer months, we're trying to make certain that we are engaging, kind of doubling down on making sure our officers are out in the community and getting familiar with the citizens who they're going to be dialoguing with and engaging with all summer long. So when events or circumstances or challenges or conflicts more so take place, when it comes to implementing the de-escalation piece, which our officers have been trained in, that there's a familiar face with the officers, and it may add an easement to de-escalating situations and coming to a better resolve or a more peaceful resolve quickly by having them out in the community. And these events, these community engagement events, assist in doing that. As far as our community engagement, we also know that it facilitates in rebuilding community trust. The chief said when he first came here that there were 3 things that he wanted to make certain that our department was doing. And one thing was reducing crime. The other part was earning back trust from our community members, and that means being present. And these community engagements just do just that. Also, other part was rebuilding our department, and not that we have a panacea for doing that at this point, but it seems to be going pretty well. And we'll see what the rest of the year holds, but I think we're doing a pretty good job with that. As far as the number 1 bullet point up there that you see, these are some events that are going to be taking place. The Paths to Peace, Community Healing and Prayer with the Unity Community Mediation Team will be taking place at Phelps Park here next on the 29th of this month. And that's something that is going to be, we've done many events around the area, but this is something that's going to be all-inclusive, like children, family members, everyone who wants to just be a part and dialogue as a community together. Also taking the kid fishing with the Minneapolis Park and Recreation. That's something that's going to take place in June. Along with that, as you guys are familiar with the Chiefs barbecues, and some of you have stepped out and joined us with those. Big talk in the community. Everyone loves to join the Chiefs barbecues, and the kids are out there having a blast. That's something that we'll continue doing. We have one that's going to be taking place in the south side of Minneapolis at the Tawfiq Mosque, and that's something that one of our chaplains in the police department is holding there. We also have Back to School Jamboree that is taking place. We partner with Hennepin County. That's something that is a great piece of community because it has easement for our parents and caretakers of our children going back to school. We give free backpacks out. We give the school supplies, and as you guys have seen these school supply lists, these days they're a laundry list of things that people have to purchase. And we found a way to engage with the community by assisting with giving them the backpacks and scissors and glue and many of the resources that they need. And we've also brought back through the chief the Battle of the Badges. That's something that community members have been talking about for many years, and during the pandemic it kind of went to the side. And that's something we brought back last year and had a great turnout. And that's something where the public safety personnel get together and have a little friendly competition on barbecue. And not that any of us are any good with it. I think Chief Tyner cheats a little bit and puts a lot of barbecue on the food, and you know, if the barbecue is good, you never really know what the food truly tastes like. So, but it's something that we truly enjoy and engage with and dialoguing with community members, and we invite you to come out and join us in all of these activities, because as we all say, you know, we're all in this together, and if we're present together, people will see where we're going as a community. That's all I have. I believe neighborhood safety will be coming up next.
Thank you. And we'll wait for questions until after, colleagues. Welcome up, Leah.
Councilmember, Chair, my name is Leah Lakes. I'm with Neighborhood Safety. For our neighborhood safety programming for the summer, we've been doing a lot of focusing on our community members and empowering them to be able to apply for our different contracts and RFPs that are out there. We've been helping build their capacity around managing finances and increasing their impact and leadership training, as well as the spotlight trainings and the institute trainings through the Minneapolis Violence Prevention Community Champions. We're working on developing those and providing training for those community members on specific topics that prevent youth violence. And then we've also been spending a lot of time focusing on building our core capacities around our community ambassador program, the violence prevention services, the violence prevention master contract. RFP is live now. So we're looking for a lot of vendors to be applying for that RFP. So we have a lot of different talent that we can draw from the needs that we're going to have in the community. We also are working on building capacity around our GVI and YGVI programs, as well as our community trauma response, as well as standing up the new violence interrupter contracts for the Minneapolis contracts. I believe fire's next.
Thank you. Welcome up, Chief.
Good afternoon, Chair and President Payne and members of the committee. My name is Brian Tyner. I am the Fire Chief of the Minneapolis Fire Department. For summer safety, most of these events don't require us to go away from our established response model, but there are a couple that do stand out. One of them is the Pride Festival, the Taste of Minnesota, and also the Aquatennial celebration. For those, we will be staffing a mobile EMS unit to kind of assist with getting through crowds and everything, and having an EMS resource right there on site. We're also going to provide boat coverage in the Mississippi River whenever there are fireworks launched from the bridge, oftentimes the Stone Arch Bridge. We have boats in the water to, in case there's any emergency or any mishaps. Along with the Hennepin County Water Patrol, we team up on that one. Lastly, we have staff department representatives who are ready to staff the command post or the emergency operations center if needed for any of these summer events. And so with that, I'll keep it short and sweet and pass it on to 911.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and welcome up, Director Hodney.
Good afternoon. I'm Director Hodney from Minneapolis Department of Emergency Communications. We historically see an increase in call volume over the summer months. It generally starts in about May. We start to see an increase of about 3,000 to 5,000 calls a month. It goes up from there in June to an additional 3,000 to 5,000 calls a month, and July gets even heavier with all of the fireworks calls that we get. Doesn't start to really drop off until a little bit in August, and then again in September when everybody returns to school. With that, our current staffing levels, we're 92% staffed right now, but as we know the increase in call volume comes, we start to increase the amount of staff that we have on site at one time. So we do that increase May 15th, again June 15th, and then again for any large planned events, making sure that we have additional staff that's on site if there's large activities happening. We have an on-site dispatcher that works during Pride, Taste of Minnesota, at the communications van that's generally on site sponsored by the fire or EMS. We've made a request to 311 to be open during the 4th of July and Taste of Minnesota weekend for the added assistance, and I have spoken to the director at that department, and they are going to be able to assist us. That was has been a very big help to us to have them open some of those large event weekends. And then finally, our staff has all given us summer safety guidebook, which is distributed in May. This helps to break down so they have at their fingertips what to do if a small event turns to a large event. Who are the notifications that we need to make? When do you call in more staff? So they are readily available as they're working through each night of the summer. And with that, I will turn it over to Director Sayer.
Much and welcome up, Director Sayers.
Good afternoon, Chair Chavez, Vice Chair Wansley, Council President Payne, and council members. Emergency management for the summer, we're really focused on the potential for severe weather events. So for that, we are working on a project to define thresholds around severe weather, especially around heat, extreme wind, very high wind miles per hour. That would then allow us to, in advance, let people know, hey, there's something coming, you should take some precautions. So we're developing with comms department canned messages that would go along with those thresholds. We, of course, always have our enterprise-wide watch officer, so if something is popping, we are available to mobilize as an enterprise quickly. And we continue to exercise as an enterprise. So in June, we have an exercise that is around a severe weather event that will be a uniform command between our fire department and public works, and we will practice as an enterprise how we would respond if something like that were to happen. That is it from me, and I believe that is it.
Cool. Thank you. And then I'll ask my colleagues to get on queue for questions. I have a few, and I think the first one is for the Neighborhood Safety Department. So Deputy Director Lakes, if you don't mind coming up. It's mostly related to the Violence Prevention Master Contract component. Well, thank you for your work and the department's work around those contracts. I'm trying to figure out how we are tying the Violence Prevention Master Contract process, and I wanted more for the public to understand, right? It opened up April 11th, from my understanding. Can you communicate to us when that deadline is, just for the public to understand, and the goal of the program and its expectation for the summer and beyond, just so we can tie it to the topic at hand? Thank you.
Council members, Chair Chavez, thank you so much for the question. We're very excited about the Master Prevention Contract. This is a contract that is open to all of the organizations that do violence prevention type work. It is currently open, as you said, and closes, I believe, May 5th, but I'll double check on that date. The hope is that we have a wide variety of people apply, who have a wide variety of expertise and a wide variety of different skills to provide to the community. And then as work orders come up, we would issue a work order for those who have already gone through the RFP process, so they don't have to go through a second RFP process. So if we have work that makes sense for the Violence Prevention Master Contract, that would go as a work order. Those vendors who are qualified would apply for that work order, and we'd be able to start the work a lot faster than a second RFP. So it's a very exciting opportunity to help supplement some of the work that we do, not replace those long-standing contracts.
Thank you. I really appreciate that update. And if we can get administrative follow-up on just the when the deadline is, so we can communicate that to community partners and the public, that would be great. My second comment or question would be more about the Violence Interrupter program. Can you give us an update on the status of that as it relates to the summer?
Chair Chavez, council members, thank you for that question. The contracts are currently we're currently in process for some of them to get the background checks and the requirements done for those who have agreed for the contracts. So those are in progress, and we should be able to have those sent for signature after all of those aspects are complete imminently. And then for the other zones, we're currently in negotiations for the other zones that didn't get coverage. So we are hoping to bring that to council soon, within the next several cycles.
So there's conversations about the zones that weren't covered and the potential to contract with a vendor through a process. Okay, cool. Thank you. And then the last question I have is mostly related to the Taste of Minnesota and Pride. I think for me, it's like the water component. I'm going to keep bringing it up in committee because I always hear feedback from the public on the accessibility for water. Do you know if there's water plans in place to make sure that the public has access to drinking water, specifically during the summer? And oftentimes, I think the first time we kicked off the Taste of Minnesota event, there was concerns about the public not having access to water. So I guess I would just like to make sure that there's conversations around that, because during the hot weather with a lot of people around you, it can get really exhausting.
I'm
Thank you, Chair Chavez, for that question. What we're planning to do this summer is making sure that everyone in the enterprise who works with the private partners who lead a lot of these events, that they are making sure they are taking into account and they're planning things exactly like this, and emphasizing how important it is for them as the financiers and planners to plan for exactly that kind of thing.
Awesome. And then when we approve these permits, that's usually the question I ask. So I guess I'm just saying in April, I hope that when we are approving and staff is going through the process, that we make sure that there's a plan in place to make sure that people are attending an event that is safe as possible. So I appreciate that. That's my only questions I had for now. I'll see if anything else bubbles up, but I'll pass it next to Vice Chair Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. Just have a couple of questions, just going back to the original legislative directive. I think point 1 was partially answered, and point 1 asked for a comprehensive overview of the Office of Community Safety's 2025 Summer Safety Plan, including a geographic breakdown of anticipated staffing levels using 2024 public safety trends as a baseline, and these staffing levels should include but are not limited to, and then we list police department, fire department, behavioral crisis response team, violence prevention providers, embedded social workers, and other law enforcement agencies. And I will name as the author of this, we listed these respective staffing divisions within the Office of Community Safety, because I often hear from my constituents, both in Ward 2 and across the city, that there's confusion around who is actually on the streets doing basically safety work, in addition to our sworn officers, and also what is the baseline for sworn officers too, because we often hear, of course, of the shortage of those workers, but when you're contrasting that with what was presented at the beginning of this presentation, where you're seeing crime trends go down, I think it's important to present a comprehensive picture of, it's not just law enforcers that are out there. We've added to our staff, staffing support and resources. So if, I don't know if this is something OCS would like to try tackling again, if you could specify, for instance, what is the baseline? Let's start with behavioral crisis response. I know that has made a transition to fire department, but what is the baseline staffing we're looking for or looking at going into this summer? Same neighborhood safety department. To follow up on Chair Chavez's question, going into this summer, how many contracts right now do we have confirmed, and what does that equate to in terms of individuals or bodies on the street? So I see Commissioner Barnett.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Wansley, Chair Chavez, Councilmember Wansley. I'm sorry I don't have all that information present. I will work to get that to you as soon as possible. I know from our conversations and meetings that I've been in with Director Harrington, we, with some of our contractors and community groups, she's had them map out what areas they're in. And I know that has taken place. I'm sorry that we don't have that information here to give to you today, if that was part of a legislative directive.
Yeah, that was part of this one, especially with the embedded social workers. I think that was the biggest piece of this, of being able to present a more comprehensive picture of what full staffing figures looks like within the Office of Community Safety going into this summer, and knowing where can the public anticipate a presence of these kind of diversity of,
I mean, we
staff?
can definitely tell you what contracts we have, followed up with the memo to you and the rest of the council members about which contracts we have and where they are. I mean, I don't think that is a problem. And I think part of your question, was it about BCR? Did you say
BCR,
something?
basically where it's the baseline staffing for that. So basically to answer part one of the legislative directive. And that includes the embedded social workers too. And from my understanding, it seems like Director Leah Lakes could likely answer the neighborhood safety department's contract piece, because I do have follow-up on that question based off of what Chair Chavez raised. Unless maybe you
just
have
quickly,
a response.
I'm sure that Deputy Lakes can probably answer that question. Chair Chavez, Councilmember Wansley, when you're talking about the embedded social worker, you know, we have social workers embedded in MPD precincts, and that we're working on that 911 piece. Is there something more you wanted about that?
So what is the staffing level between MPD and 911? What is the baseline? What is the full number of those FTEs?
Got it. Okay. All right. We'll work on that. Thank you.
And then for Deputy Lakes. Thank you. I did have a follow-up question based off of what Chair Chavez raised, because I'm actually kind of concerned about this, especially as someone who did bring that motion earlier this year around transitioning some of these programs, specifically YGBI and GBI, over to the county. And one of the things that was shared with me was that would create interruption or delay of services. And first, I want to make sure I'm recounting something correct. Were these services supposed to start by April 1st?
Chair Wansley, you are correct. The estimated timeline was April 1st for those services, correct?
Is that also inclusive of Minneapolis for April 1st?
Councilmember Wansley, I don't remember if April 1st was the same for Minneapolis, but around that same timeline. That was the estimated timeline. That is correct.
Because I recall we also were met with, if we delayed that item for further consideration, especially when we found out about the gaps, that we were met, there would be a delay in service for that. So the reason why I'm asking in that is, can you share what current contracts have been finalized and what vendors are actually providing services at this current point?
Council members, for YGBI, GBI.
And GBI in Minneapolis.
For the YGBI, GBI contracts, those are currently ready for signature. We are currently waiting for them to get sent for signature.
For all 6?
For all of the contracts for GBI, YGBI that need to get issued. All of them collectively are waiting for signature.
So waiting for signature, but not providing services.
Correct.
So we have no YGBI, GBI programs actually active right now.
We have no contracts providing YGBI, GBI services through Minneapolis currently. The old contracts that we had previously ended March 31st, and the new ones are in queue to get signed and sent out for signature.
You answered the question, but I want to name why that's troubling, because we were told the services would be provided by April 1st. Happening. Communities would have been served. Homicides would have been on decline. So I would name that's very troubling. So for Minneapolis, same, is there any services that's being rendered right now?
Council members, the services for Minneapolis are, from the old contract, are done. March 31st was also the date. New contracts have not started for that service.
Since council's approval of them?
Correct.
So we don't have also Minneapolis services right now? So, okay. And those are also awaiting signature?
Council members, Chair Chavez, council members, the Minneapolis contracts, several of them are waiting for the new vendors to meet the requirements to sign the contract. Others are still in negotiation for other zones. None of them are in a place where we're ready to send them for signatures. GVI, YGVI, we are ready for signatures. We're just waiting for those signatures to be occurring. YGVI, or Minneapolis, we are currently working with vendors to get all of the requirements to sign the contracts finalized for some of them, and then for others, we are negotiating zones.
That part makes sense. I think, again, by the time those contracts made it to council, it was framed as these contracts, because again, we were informed that these were services that were ready to go. I want to say, again, there was an April 1st deadline, because again, the concern is we want to beat the summer before, we know crime, or that's a point where we see that increase. And we thought those contracts were going to be finalized, vendors were ready to provide services. And then, yes, we learned that there would be a gap based off of selection, and we came forward with the funding resolution for that. So anticipated a delay in that, but it is concerning to hear that right now there is no services for that first phase of contracts that were approved. I think there was an assumption amongst council based off of the information presented to us that services would have been immediately rendered by the deadline presented to us, similarly to the YGVI, GVI contracts, which now we're April 23rd. I think there's been a long-standing assumption that those services were already in just activity right now, and there would be young people being served. So I would say that's also very troubling, and definitely need some follow-up on that piece. So do you also, with that, do we have, I know we recently got a presentation from NSC, I believe it was here too, where you overviewed the staffing chart, and it was color-coded around hiring process. Where are we at for the YGVI, GVI program manager?
Chair Chavez, Councilmember Wansley, very good question. We have a start date for a public health specialist to take on that body of work for May 5th. The additional, May 5th is the short answer. So that position has been identified as someone to work on that for the May 5th is the date that they are currently planning on starting.
Is the public health specialist position the same as the program manager position, or, okay? Yes. Great, okay. And do we also, I can't recall from the chart, is there also a position filled for the Minneapolis program manager too?
Chair Chavez, council members, the Minneapolis and the GVI positions, we were hiring a pool from the same applicant pool. One has confirmed and has signed. The other one is still in negotiations. So we're still going back and forth with one of the candidates. So they haven't signed that's saying that they would start yet.
And this is just for the Minneapolis?
For Minneapolis and GVI. Both of the positions will be backups for each other. So we have two people who are kind of, one will be a primary and one will be a secondary, and they'll be able to support each other as we have any transitions. So that is where we're at for the hiring for that senior public health specialist position.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I had, Deputy Director Lakes, and sorry for NSD. I did have a follow-up question for MPD with some of the investigative pieces that was shared.
Hi, Councilman.
Hi. I did want to go back to looking at slide 14, just looking at, I know we had a presentation last year where diving into some of the clearance rates too, that I think it's referenced on here around investigative or investigations for additional strategies. I want to make sure I'm on the right slide. That is 14. Yes, focus zones and subsequent long-term investigations using data analytics. I wanted to see if you all were also considering some of the initiatives, for instance, that St. Paul utilized. I know they shifted their non-fatal shooting units or officers to their non-fatal shooting unit, and that actually helped to move what was originally their clearance rate from 38% to around 68%. And I'm trying to, I know last year when we got the presentation on our clearance rate for MPD, it was relatively low, so just wanted to get a sense of if we're looking to do something similar, because I know clearance rates is a major component around how we also address crime rates, also following up on cases as well, so just wanted to get a sense of how we were approaching that work too, as part of our investigations efforts.
Sure. So Chair, Councilmember Wansley, so we combined our homicide unit and our shooting team last year.
Okay.
So we're tackling it with more people. Well, it's about the same, right? Our attrition's down.
Mhm.
So we decided to join the two teams so that more teams could go on call and that we wouldn't burn out our homicide detectives. So using that approach, and then with the help of the BCA and different agencies that will help us from time to time, like last year, if you remember, we had kind of a big crime spree and shootings. We brought all teams in together from state, local partners that helped us with those. And so now we want to get to a point as we're hiring a lot more people are coming into the pipeline, and build that team back up. And we'll probably eventually separate the two, but we're working with PSP, the public safety partners, as well, on that non-fatal shooting assessment, on different things that we can do. So we're not quite there yet with all the recommendations that they gave us, but we're working with them still. We meet bi-weekly and then monthly with all the agencies on that project.
Okay, that's good to know. Do we have a sense of where our clearance rate is right now as it correlates to some of those changes that you all have been implementing?
And then we also, Chair, Councilmember Wansley, we also changed our SOP, our processes on kind of how we do closure rates too, so that we weren't capturing them quick enough for how we were doing it. So our clearance rates, I have to double check this week, but I know they're higher than what they were looking like initially.
Okay.
But I know our homicide rates are down 67% year to date through April 14th.
But not an exact, you don't have the exact figure for the closure rates as of now?
Not right in front of me. I can get them to you.
Okay, awesome. If I can just note that for a staff follow-up. Thank you so much. And I believe that was the only question that I had for MPD folks. Actually, yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you. So I do have a question for Director Lakes. These vendors that we've yet to finalize the contracts with because they have to get information back to you, what information are they not providing? Is it background checks, drug tests, all the above?
Chair Chavez, Councilmember Rainville, yes. The answer is all of the above. We are looking for the first time their name is put into the contract for each employee. They have to go through a drug screening as well as a background check. So we're waiting for all of those to kind of get done.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And then just one last, it's been a long day, so I'm going to be really short on this, but I feel compelled to stand to the defense of the fire department, especially Chief Tyner, as I had 3 uncles that were firefighters, many classmates at De La Salle High School, and firefighters, everybody knows firefighters are better cooks than cops. Everybody.
I put myself on cue. Deputy Director Lakes, I do have a question on the component. So I'm trying to get a better understanding of so every single violence interrupter contract, they haven't provided that background check, so every single one, or is there different issues happening? I'm just trying to understand, if we said we were going to start on April 1st, now there is 23 days gaps of service. I had office hours last night. Even my own constituents were like, I live right here. When the violence interrupters are here, it is helpful, and they're no longer there. And that's because there's something missing, which is that contract. My constituent has felt it. was very appreciative that we had Director Amanda Harrington there, who was able to at least talk about the process. But that was an actual conversation that happened with my constituents yesterday. So I'm trying to understand. So all the contracts that we approved for violence interrupter services that the City Council we just approved. So those contracts. So we already sent those contracts out to get the signatures. Then I'm just trying to understand what's happening.
Chair Chavez, council members, the current status of most of those contracts are in progress with the vendors. So they're not really, I would say, issues. It's just making sure they're getting everything done, and that just takes a little bit of time. So they're going through all the requirements. They'll do the trainings for how to do the data entry. All of those things just take coordination and time to complete. So they're all in progress, and then once those are done, then they get sent for signatures.
What is the estimated timeline of what that usually takes?
Chair Chavez, council members, this is the first time we've done it this way under the stricter cure violence model. This will help us for future, so we know how long it will take based off of this experience, but right now we don't have a good estimate.
Okay. Is there an estimate time that you think this is going to be complete by? It's just when residents are reaching out, when I heard them freshly just yesterday, it's hard for me to tell them that I don't know when this is going to get figured out.
Chair Chavez, council members, I appreciate that. It is our top priority. It is what NSD is focusing the most energy on right now. We are not ever excited to have any gaps in services. So it is what we are putting 100% of our priority on, is getting these contracts signed.
Thank you. And then we have Vice Chair Wansley, and then if anybody gets on cue, and then we're done.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. I'm actually going back to the Minneapolis presentation that you all did, and similar the questions that you raised. One thing that I appreciated about some of the new guardrails that you put in place based off of the recommendations both from procurement and it seemed like from cure violence as well, was actually baking those in very early in the process. So I'm looking, for instance, where is it? Slide 9. Well, no, starting slide 10. You mentioned, one, you're starting very early with before you do the RFP, you do the support for potential responders. So there's a pre-proposal meeting and the question and answer. So it sounds like that's a space for vendors who might have concerns, or for you to articulate, you have to do the background checks, all those things. And then it goes on in the next slide that talks about the evaluation of proposals. And this sounds like this is the space where, I don't know if it's during the Q&A, you all mentioned there's more robust pre-engagement with potential vendors that are looking to seek contracts so that they're aware of this. But there's an evaluation that NSD or OCS does that does include financial risk assessments where you overview staff qualifications and management so that these vendors know to provide or front load that information very readily. So I think that is also what led to our understanding that by the time those contracts come forward that we approve, that those things have been already squared away in terms of background checks. Like, these are the organizations that should be most readily in a place to provide these informations, go through those processes, because as you highlight, you front-loaded this process to essentially make sure the vetting process goes smoothly and that we're selecting the highest quality, most prepared and equipped vendors to provide quality services to our residents, so that we don't lead to what's happening now, which sounds like an absence of services. We're not even at a disruption. There seems to be just an outright absence. So I'm confused now is there a disconnect between the are vendors just confused if you're front loading this information sharing now at the very early process before they even submit a bid for the RFP? And how are there confusion points now where they are at the end of a contract and there's issues with background checks and documentation?
Chair Chavez, Councilmember Wansley, excellent question, and I like the brainstorming around what can we do better to front load things so it's faster. The example, let's pretend 100 organizations apply for these contracts. We don't want every single person who applies to do background checks for all of the employees they would have on their roster, because we don't, if we have them apply in September and they don't start till April, the city's the one who pays for all those background checks to happen of 100 organizations. So we only want the chosen organizations to go through that process. So some things it makes sense to do that front loading on, such as tell us your financial history of your organization. Other things like let's do the drug tests for all your employees for all the organizations doesn't. So, but I like the spirit of the idea of learning what did we learn from this time around that we could front load more. This specific list of requirements might not be something that we improve in the future in that area, but it is important to have that information and get it done as timely as possible.
Okay, that's good to know. And then I want to make sure I recall, because we end up putting more, I wouldn't say limitations, but we did put or reduce the number of interrupters that we are funding per contract. I think it's around 7 per contract. So we approved ultimately 5 contracts, so it's 7 interrupters. So are we essentially awaiting background checks for those 7? Just hypothetically, they will have to do background checks for each 7 per vendor that was approved.
Chair Chavez, Councilmember Wansley, yes. And then any other backups that they want. So if they have a roster of subs for that 7, so 7 are on the ground at a time. And then if they have backups, those backups, and if those backups want to be in the original contract and not be an amendment, then they would also do background checks for the backup employees.
Okay, and was it our understanding, because, yeah, I'm looking at the contract, the assumption was we would start April 1st. Was it just the hope that from NSD that this process was not going to take that long, that I think we didn't even approve these contracts until 2 cycles ago? So was there anticipation that that process would have been smoother? So by April 1st, these contracts would have been not only just in place, but the vendors would have been providing services. Because once again, I think that is just the concern of, we thought people were going to be on the streets. That's what was also told to us, like, don't make changes, don't move nothing to the county. People are going to be on the streets providing services or working via MOUs, providing these services on April 1st.
Chair Chavez, Councilmember Wansley, the goal was to start services April 1st. That was the intent. That was how we planned the whole process.
So I'm assuming then, just seeing this process before, assuming people provide backup, that process goes forward, we should be anticipating modifications to these contracts then.
Chair Chavez, Councilmember Wansley, we would be seeing modifications for when we start the process. So we started the process before in November, expecting it to start in April. That seems like a long time, but now through this experience, we've learned a more refined timeline for the future.
So likely for extension, because I think we just dealt with that actually this cycle, so that vendors are actually able to spend the money that has been allocated. So the contract would likely be an extension of some sorts, but I think this gets to Chair Chavez's question of, can we anticipate maybe a contract modification or extension to start in May, depending on if these documentation processes go as smooth. I think the concern is, like, again, because it's summer safety, it's April. Ideally, we would not want to be in a place where these services are just starting in June. So could we anticipate possibly a contract modification before June?
Chair Chavez, Councilmember Wansley, the goal is to start the current contracts as soon as possible. I'm not quite sure what the modification of the contracts would look like?
Only because I'm confused if we have, if the contracts or vendors have not started yet, and they're likely, I'm trying to, just because we have dealt with this, if they did not start by April 1st, it sounds like there would have to be a change in the contract. Let's say the background checks come back. These vendors, be it YGBI, GBI, or Minneapolis, let's say they start May 23rd. Would there have to be a contract amendment that a
Councilmember Wansley, when the contracts get signed, often towards the end of that negotiation process, the term of the contract will maybe change if it's been a couple months since the anticipated start date. So the term could change. It's up to the agreement of the parties what that looks like.
And City Attorney, what my question is, I've seen that typically that change has to come back before council for approval.
So, Chair Chavez, Councilmember Wansley, the departments and city staff seek permission from the city council to execute the necessary documents to effectuate the council-approved relationship, contractual relationship. Oftentimes if a term of a contract might change